My presentation this morning is called From Fire to Wine. And it begins with the creation legends of the Pomo, the Miwok, and the Wapo Native Americans who have lived on the valleys and shores of Lake County. They've called this place home. And we use their legends as a point of origin for both the name of Mount Konocti and for the terroir here itself. A Pomoan legend tells of one Chief Konocti. He forbid his beautiful daughter, Lupiomi, from marrying her suitor, a rival chieftain named Kabel. The two warriors engaged in battle. They hurled boulders across the narrows of Clear Lake. Neither survived the fight. The blood of Kabel stained the red hills to the north, and Konocti's body formed the volcano that bears his name. In her grief, Lupiomi threw herself into the lake, and we can still see her tears today springing up from Omaracharbi, which is the name of the spring in Soda Bay. So Clear Lake was once called Lupiomo Lake by the natives, and that name lives on in the silty, clay, alluvial Lupioma soils that are found in the valleys and that are so ideally suited to growing Sauvignon Blanc. Although Mount Konocti at 4,300 some odd feet lies dormant, it's one of the youngest volcanoes in California. Geologists consider it very likely that the region's first inhabitants witnessed the last eruption of the volcano between 10 and 11,000 years ago. Konocti and the Clear Lake volcanic fields were formed 2 to 3 million years ago, and they're home to the largest geothermal fields in the United States. The mountain itself is one of 8 active areas on a watch list in California by the U.S. Geological Survey. So what's compelling about this is that 1% of the soil in the world is volcanic. And it's a feature that links both the wines of Lake County to far-flung places like Santorini in Greece and Mount Etna in Italy. But Sauvignon Blanc doesn't grow in those places, right? It grows here. It's planted here on a variety of soils. It likes the alluvial terraces of Jaffa, Manzanita, Wapo, Forbesville sandstone here in Kelsey Bench. Kelsey Bench is warmer than Big Valley, a little cooler than Red Hills. It enjoys the medium-grade basalt and scoria, the porous red gravel we find in High Valley, which is the coldest of the Sauvignon Blanc terroirs. In the Red Hills, it digs its roots deep into the iron oxide-rich weathered basalt and the Glenview Arrowhead soils, which formed on obsidian. And we certainly know about the obsidian. In Big Valley, it grows on the deep loams and the sedimentary lake deposits of Coal, Clear Lake, and Still soils. But it wasn't the soil that brought the first white settlers to Lake County. It was Clear Lake itself. It was the fresh water, and it was the mild climate that brought them here. Cattle ranching was the first enterprise here in Lake County, but mining and agriculture were both very essential to the early economy. Grape growing and winemaking have been present in Lake County from the arrival of the earliest settlers. We really date it to about the late 1850s, 1854, we have some records of that. But valuable minerals were a really significant part of the economy. They were mined during the gold rush. I'm showing you here a picture of borax, which is called white gold. It's used in artisanal gold mining as a substitute for mercury. And we really wish that more borax had been mined instead of the cinnabar, which is a brick red form of mercury, and it was also used in gold processing. And although mining resulted in long-term consequences for the lake itself, mining is a thirsty business, and Lake County's early wineries thrived, and they expanded ambitiously in the late 19th century to meet the demand of both the regions, this region and the population growth in the state. So this period is a fascinating period, 1859 to 1889, a 30-year period of expansion of the wine industry in Lake County. The county was incorporated in 1961, and the industry really boomed during this time for several reasons. But according to the U.S. Ag Census of 1859, which is the earliest record I found, we have one Thomas Allen, who is credited with the first official record of winemaking, having 1,200 gallons of wine in storage. So fantastic, he was busy. So the years between 59 and 72, I call the calm before the storm. The vines were planted by settlers, but the industry in Sonoma and Napa was really flourishing. And there was a flurry of planting that began in Lake County in the 1870s because phylloxera had struck in Sonoma and had migrated to Napa, but it did not make its way to Lake County to any great degree. I couldn't find a record of it at any rate. So in looking at where the pioneering wineries are located, kind of chronologically, we can see that there's a ready pattern of development around Middletown and also around Upper Lake. And I'm not going to take you through it date by date, but I'm just going to quickly show you where the wineries popped up. And then we'll talk about a few of the enduring names, people whose names have actually survived from this very early period. So, after Thomas Allen got established here, we have one John Lyons and David Voigt, and the wineries kind of pop up in twos. It's interesting. 72 to 79, they're every couple years, and then from 1881 to 1888, there's wineries every single year being established, which is really fascinating. So this is Buckingham and Motier. This is Klugelman, Berger. Serranus Hastings, we'll hear a little bit more about him. David Lowbry and Ralph Nichols. Many of these names are lost to time, and so it's really interesting to hear them again. George Ray, he built a 20,000-gallon winery in Lower Lake. 1884, Nikolai and Tobias Bilsbach built wineries side by side. 1885, Charles Hammond. Charles Hammond trained at Inglenook. 1882 was the first vintage there. And his wines actually medaled at the Chicago World Fair. So he put Lake County on the map quite early. 1886 and 1888, Lily Langtree, of course, made her appearance in Lake County. So what were these early wine pioneers growing? What grape varieties did they actually grow? Well, let's look at the paths that they took. This is the Hopland grade, and grapes from Upper Lake were hauled over the Hopland grade into Mendocino. And then, it looks like I've lost one of my, arrow. Here's my arrow down here on the bottom. So, and this is the old Lolly Toll Road, and grapes were hauled from Middleton down to Calistoga over the old Lolly Toll Road. And they were also hauled, the grade also, of course, followed from Upper Lake down to Middleton as well, too. But that was a lesser route. So what were they growing? What was actually planted here? The grape varieties, the white grape varieties like Chasselas and Muscat, they were favored because they were superior table grapes. They also readily made sweet wines. So they could be eaten at table, and they could easily be made into sweet wines. Given that the production of Zinfandel was well established in Sonoma and Mendocino, cuttings would have come from growers there, they would have been sourced there, and they were also brought, of course, with the settlers. Clay Shannon told me an anecdote about pioneers that brought Zinfandel, now known as Tribudrag, from Slovenia, along with Muscat to High Valley in around 1875. There's no record of Sauvignon Blanc being grown or planted during this time. There's Sauvignon Vert, of course, which is a synonym for Muscadel. Both of those are mentioned, but no Sauvignon Blanc. So 1870s, grapes were being planted and wine was made in Lake County, but it was cold, hot, and carbonated spring water that brought the wealthy tourists to Lake County to take the waters. By 1870, there were 18 resorts scattered around the lake. And tourists would make the 9-hour trip from Napa by train, stage, and then continue on sometimes by boat to their destinations. There's little doubt that in addition to drinking the spring water, they also drank locally made wine as well, as did the miners, of course. The first hot spring on record was called Harbin. It was built in 1870, and despite the wildfires, it survives today. In 1873, Bartlett Springs was established, and this really got my attention. It was opened as a health resort, and it bottled water and sold it all over the state. So why weren't they busy bottling wine like that? They were bottling the water. It was a combination of factors that impacted this industry, primarily the 1906 earthquake, the advent of the Model T car, and a shift in the way the wealthy vacationed that really signaled the decline of the industry, and the wildfires of the 1930s sealed its fate. So there's little or no surviving evidence of these early industries in Lake County. But the names of some of the more famous wine-growing pioneers have endured. And one of them is Stefan Nicolai. Stefan Nicolai was a Prussian stonemaster and also a winemaker and wine grower. He built the jail at Lower Lake in 1876. Well, if you were wanting a stone winery built, he was clearly the man for the job. So he was commissioned by Ray to build a stone winery for him in 1883, and this is Ray's winery in 1883 that you see. And oddly enough, the wineries didn't survive, but the jail did. The jail is California Historic Landmark 429, and this is how it looks today. Cervantes Hastings, he was the first Chief Justice of California in 1851. He became Attorney General. He was one of California's largest landholders. He had 115 acres under vine in Lake County. He was a botanist, so he was really into plants. He's credited with the white rush lily that grows on serpentine bogs. In 1878, he founded Hastings Law School with an endowment which endures. The spotlight followed professional beauty Lily Langtree wherever she went. In 1887, she bought 4,200 acres in Gwinnett, and it was planted to 20 acres were planted to vine, and she had a winery. We know that she had a French winemaker, one Henri Dessel, to take care of her vines, gardens, and orchards. And the production from her vineyard was listed as 50 tons of Burgundy or Pinot. But her stay in Lake County was brief. After her first visit, she never returned. She sold the property before the earthquake in 1906, and production in her vineyard ceased, of course, with the Volstead Act in 1919 and Prohibition. She was considered the first celebrity to lend her endorsement to products, and her image was resurrected and used for decades to sell Langtree wine by the Magoon family. And today, this estate is owned by Foley Family Vineyards. Okay, snapshot, 1892, 48 growers, 8 wineries, the peak of the Lake County wine industry in the late 19th century. Phylloxera had taken its toll on Napa and Sonoma at this time, but it was the passing of the Volstead Act and eventually Prohibition that closed the doors to the wineries. Now we enter the new era, the modern era for Lake County. And of course, by 1919, just as wineries were seeing their fate written on the wall, there were 700 acres of pears in Lake County. The first pears were planted here in 1880s, actually by Lewis Henderson, a great-grandfather of Myron Holden Reed, who we'll hear more about. And pears did very well, as did walnuts. There's less information about the history of walnut growing in Lake County, but these two agricultural products stepped up and became the primary economic engine of the county. In 1965, there were 100 acres of grapes planted in Lake County. And in 1966, we have the leaping off point for our modern pioneers, which of course are Marilyn and Myron Holden Reed. They, along with a handful of producers, planted grapes as early as 1966, and from that moment forward, pear and walnut orchards gave way to grapes. Holden Reed planted Zinfandel on Gaudy Lane, and I believe he still farms it today, and the fruit was sold to Parducci, Fetzer, and Kendall Jackson. (1974 to 1982 were some interesting years. In 1978 was the earliest grape crush report I could get my hands on, and of the first listing of Sauvignon Blanc in Lake County on the crush report was 1978 at 323 tons. Of Great. It made an appearance. It wasn't in the report in 77. There was no Sauvignon Blanc listed in 77. There may have been some, but that's what the report told us. In 74, Jess Jackson bought a pear in Walnut Orchard. We drove by this morning, and he converted it to grapes. And of course, he planted Chardonnay, bless you. And that was his 1982 Vintners Reserve Chardonnay. That wine went on, it was made by Jed Steele, and it went on to win a platinum medal in 1983 at the American Wine Competition. So that was the first point that Lake County really came to national recognition for one of its designated wines. In 1981, Louis Martini planted Snows Lake Vineyard, primarily to Barbera and to Riesling in what is now the Red Hills AVA. Oh, here's a great quote from Jed from the Washington Post in 1988, and I thought it certainly applies today, but we know that Jed makes lots of different wines, and he certainly makes some that he enjoys himself as well, too. So Gwinnett Valley was Lake County's first AVA. In 1981, the Grape Crush Report tells us there were 623 tons of Sauvignon Blanc crushed. So we doubled in that period. Gwinnett, which was home to Lily Langtry's ranch, was under the ownership family of the Magoon family of that time. And 81, of course, was when Louis Martini purchased Snows Lake and planted it. We tasted some of the Barberas from that vineyard in 2013, vintages from 1989 forward, and they were really outstanding. We tasted some older wines from that site in 2013. So the Clear Lake AVA was established in 1984. And in 1984, there were 1,400 tons of Sauvignon Blanc crushed in Lake County. I call this period the quiet expansion. Benmore Valley, which is a historic AVA, was established in 1992. But in 1982, Jed Steele told me he first got his hands on Sauvignon Blanc from the Las Lomas vineyard in Kelseyville. And he has continuously made Sauvignon Blanc from that site for 36 years. In 91, Myron Holdenreid, one of our earliest pioneers, modern pioneers, he built or converted Stumer Winery in Lower Lake to Wildhurst Winery. And at that time, in 1991, there were 3 wineries in Lake County, 3. Canocti, Gwinnett, and Kendall Jackson. That changed in 93 when Jim Fetzer came along. Where am I? That changed when Jim Fetzer came along in 1993 and established Seago. Don't I skip Clear Lake? So the Clear Lake AVA was founded in 1984 and Benmore Valley in 1992. Seago came along in 1993, and it was originally an organic and biodynamic farm growing lavender, olive oil, and honey. And I think the boat dock there is one of the most unique aspects of wineries in Lake County, still operating today. Okay, Jess Jackson. Jed Steele, who'd left Kendall Jackson to start his own winery, bought one of the 3 wineries in Lake County, the Canocti Winery, in 1996. And that was a leaping off point for Steele wine in Lake County. Clay Shannon also got started in 1996 at Home Ranch. And he went on to he started as a grower, and he went on to make wine in 2004. So he started planting in 96 and eventually made wine in 2004. Clay has some comments about Sauvignon. In 1997, Andy Beckstoffer entered the picture, and Marilyn and Myron moved their winery from Lower Lake to Kelseyville. (1999 to 2000) saw quite a bit of activity. The Molnar family, Arpad and Peter, established Obsidian Ridge, and they're pictured here with their winemaker Alex Belaz. Elise and Kaj Allman from Six Sigma got started in Lower Lake, and Gregory and Marianne Graham, of course, in the Red Hills. (2001) We saw Jerry Brassfield, who he had bought 1,700 acres for a retreat some 44 years ago. He started planting grapes in 2001, and in the last record in 2016, the winery has 267 acres under vine. Of course, Nick Butita, whose family had farmed grapes in Sonoma from the 50s, purchased Rosa d'Oro, which is on the Kelsey Bench. I think it's the only winery on the Kelsey Bench, and he focused on Italian varieties. So Greg Graham told me that he started making Sauvignon Blanc from the Rolling Hills Vineyard in Red Hills in 2005. He's since shifted his vineyards to Kelseyville in Big Valley. So Clay Shannon at Shannon Ridge said that Sauvignon Blanc really started taking off in the mid-2000s. He planted on demand. People came to him and said, if you plant it, we will buy it. Clay grows Sauvignon in High Valley at 2,200 feet on Franciscan soils, and he says that the wines are less grassy there and lots of flavor. So in 2004, we had 7,000 tons of Sauvignon Blanc crushed. So from our last point of departure, we can see that that is the case, that it's absolutely the case that Sauvignon Blanc took off in 2004. Here we have the Paul and Kelly Manuel, and Paul's our host today, and he started Chasewater in 2011. Paul's from Grass Valley, came down to Lake County, and we also saw that Gallo stepped up and bought Snows Lake, that vineyard that had been established by Louis Martini. So our final AVA in our milestone here, our chronology, is the approval of the Kelsey Bench in Big Valley in 2013. And the Grape Crush report tells us that in 2013 we had 13,000 tons of Sauvignon Blanc crushed. So just as the Native Americans who lived on this land and were part of the terroir, many of the individuals who grow and make wine here today are also natives. They're native to Lake County and to California. And I'd like to invite you to discover the present-day history of wine growing in Lake County by talking to the person next to you, right? To hear firsthand from the people who live and work here and farm. And I also would like to invite you to enjoy our deep dive, our immersion into all things Sauvignon Blanc. Great. Thank you. Thanks to the Lake County Wine Grape Commission and event sponsors this morning. Put those up there. Oh, quick snapshot. 170 growers, 40 wineries. Here's our current snapshot for 2017. And a bit of market glance here at Sauvignon Blanc that shows us that it's holding its own against Pinot Noir, eclipsing Pinot Gris, and really looking optimistic. Okay, great. Thanks to our sponsors, our event partners here, and our sponsors. And you'll see these slides throughout the day.